5:26 a.m., February 2026. Votkinsk, Russia. The Iskander-M factory, the beating heart of Russia's ballistic arsenal, is burning furiously. 5 homemade Ukrainian FP-5 Flamingo drones have just turned Russia's industrial pride into a pile of smoking scrap. But rewind just 41 seconds earlier, Russia had one final chance to save everything. 2 MiG-31 Foxhounds were locking on to the last remaining drones when their commander ordered them to return to base. The reason? 7 phantom Oreshnik signatures had just appeared on radar. That was the dumbest mistake of the night. That order was a betrayal of their own last chance to protect the factory. This moment started at 5 a.m. when 28 LEA-100 drones lit up the radar screens. To understand why Ukraine went after Votkinsk, picture this. Russia has been pounding Ukraine with 40 to 60 Iskander-M missiles every month. These are short-range ballistic beasts that are incredibly tough to stop. The factory cranking them out is right here at Votkinsk, deep in Russia, over 870 miles from the border.
Defense systems active.
But here is the real kicker. Since mid-2025, Ukrainian intelligence spotted the place expanding rapidly. New machine halls and underground bays for hiding heavy production have tripled the output from pre-war levels. How? Russia quietly sneaked in precision CNC machines from China, Taiwan, and Belarus. They use sneaky middlemen to dodge international sanctions. No big shipments to trigger alarms, just a steady drip that kept the production lines humming. There are even whispers that Votkinsk might now be assembling the new Oreshnik. That is the hypersonic intermediate-range missile Moscow loves to brag about, but refuses to confirm. Ukraine could not let this eternal war factory keep growing. The Storm Shadow missile could barely reach it, but Russia's S-400 radars at Kazan and those sneaky mobile sites make any fixed flight path a suicide run. So Ukraine did not plan a fixed route. They built a path that only opens when the enemy makes a mistake. Back to 5:16 a.m. 28. Small blips lit up the radar screens. Those blips were LEA-100 drones, cheap Ukrainian recon birds, barely the size of a small car. They were flying low, at 300 feet, with a ground speed of 85 knots. Their radar cross-section is tiny, like a bird on steroids. It is hard for even the S-400's gravestone radar to hold a solid lock at that range and altitude. But 28 of them appearing at once was no accident. They were spread out in a loose fan. Some hugged the treetops, while others popped up briefly to fake a bigger threat. Alarms blared across the base. 2 MiG-31 Foxhounds, tail numbers Red 31 and Red 37, roared down the runway at Perm. Their afterburners kicked out long blue flames. 4 minutes later, they were passing 18,000 feet at Mach 1.8. Their Zaslon-M radars began sweeping the sky ahead. The Foxhound is a specialized machine built for one job: long-range interception at extreme speed. Its phased array radar can track targets at 120 miles. Its R-37M missile can engage targets at over 200 miles. For chasing down slow, low-flying drones, it is massively overqualified. It is like using a surgical scalpel to open a cardboard box. But the pilots do not complain. Overkill is still a kill. The lead pilot locked onto the first cluster. 6 contacts in tight formation were heading directly for Votkinsk. He selected 2 R-37M missiles from his weapons menu, ranged 94 miles, well within the engagement envelope. He fired. The first 2 drones disintegrated in mid-air. Then the next 2, then 4 more, simultaneously. The Pantsir SM battery on the eastern perimeter engaged with its 57 E-6 missiles. The intercept rate was near perfect. Ukrainian drone operators watching their screens saw green dots vanish, one after another. 8 down, 12 down, 15 down. The Russian duty officer tracked the engagement on his tactical screen and allowed himself a smile. He confirmed 12 intercepts. Remaining contacts continued their approach. He noted the drone speeds, the formation patterns, and the lack of electronic emissions. It was just a weak 2.4 GHz control link, consumer-grade equipment. This is a harassment operation, he thought. They are testing our response time. He marked it in his log as routine. He was right about one thing. They were testing response time, but it was not for the reason he thought. 5:21 a.m., 17 drones were still airborne, now within 40 miles of Votkinsk. The MiG-31s were repositioning for a second firing pass. The Pantsir-SM crew had reloaded and was tracking 5 inbound contacts. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian electronic warfare operator sat in a converted van 620 miles away. He had been watching Russian radar emissions for the last 14 minutes. He was waiting for exactly this moment. Both Foxhounds were repositioned and focused on the remaining drones to the northwest. He opened a specific software module on his terminal, the Ghost Letter. It is a purpose-built signal spoofing tool. It was developed from captured Russian EW doctrine and signals intelligence gathered from the 2024 Oreshnik test flights. The concept is simple, but the execution is extraordinarily difficult. It generates synthetic radar return signatures across multiple frequencies. These signatures match the specific RCS profile, Doppler shift, and trajectory of an Oreshnik missile. It mimics a missile at Mach 10 plus, inbound from the northwest at 65,000 feet. Not just one signature, but 7 simultaneously from different vectors. It looked as though a salvo launch had just taken place from somewhere over Estonia. He activated the system. The lead MiG-31 pilot had his thumb hovering over the fire button, locked on drone number 18. He froze for one heartbeat in pure frustration. Then he yanked the stick hard right, slammed the afterburner, and peeled away toward plane. His wingman followed silently. The 11 surviving Ukrainian drones pushed forward uncontested. No interceptors were left in the sky. The Pantsir crews kept firing at the decoys, but burned through their missiles fast. The commander ordered them to hold fire to save ammo for the actual threats. Those drones carried almost nothing, just small smoke dispensers and noise emitters. They were like angry hornets designed only to keep pinging the radar. No explosions, just a total distraction. Ukraine spent about $140,000 on cheap hardware to achieve something priceless. They pulled every air defense asset at Votkinsk into a state of full panic. They forced the MiG-31s home and flooded radars with a fake Oreshnik storm that never existed. They bought a window of opportunity, 17 minutes of clear sky, while the S-400 reconfigured and the Foxhounds turned around. 17 minutes was all the FP5 Flamingo needed to slip through, low and quiet. The 5 FP5 Flamingos had been ghosting through the night for 4.5 hours. The spoofing had finally cracked the door open. They had launched quietly from hidden spots across Kursk just before midnight. Each one hugged the ground at under 200 feet, threading through the Ural foothills like shadows. No radar emissions, no satellite chatter, just inertial navigation using preloaded digital terrain maps. They stayed low and quiet. The S-400's long-range sweeps missed them, and the terrain broke the line of sight for ground radars. This patient, low-altitude crawl is why they survived while the Russians chased ghosts in the sky. Total cost per drone? Roughly $180,000. For perspective, one Russian R-37M missile costs about $1 million. The Russians had fired 6 of them tonight, chasing decoys worth $140,000 combined. They spent $6 million to clear the sky for 5 weapons that cost less than a decent Moscow apartment. At 5:23 a.m., each Flamingo's onboard computer picked up a single encrypted 0.8 second pulse. It was a waypoint update from the Ukrainian satellite relay. It confirmed the current position of the mobile Pantsir-SM that had redeployed 40 minutes earlier. All 5 drones adjusted course by 3 degrees left, almost in unison. They crossed the outer Votkinsk security perimeter at 200 feet. Airspeed was 340 knots, with engines muffled by a southwestern terrain fold. The Pantsir crews were still looking up and northwest for the Phantom Oreshniks. Attention was high and far. The Flamingos were low and close. The S-400 was reorienting its search radar, leaving an 11-mile gap over the factory. The 5 drones slipped through with room to spare. At 5:26 a.m., their flight computers triggered the terminal approach sequence. Final leg, 41 seconds. 5 shadows converged on the factory lights. Back in Kharkiv, the operators watched the telemetry tick down with pounding hearts. The moment was here. The duty officer at the security post spotted it first, not on radar, but on the optical camera feed. A dark shape, low and fast, trailing a thin heat shimmer. He keyed the radio. Inbound low, southwest. Too late. The 5 flamingos had already split their approach to hit from different vectors. 2 Torem, 2 batteries, locked on. Short-range radars grabbed the lead pair at 4 miles. 2 missiles launched from the western ring. The lead flamingo jinked left into a ridge shadow, buying precious seconds. The Tor guidance fought the maneuver and held the lock. The first drone was intercepted and dropped from the scope. The second Tor crew pivoted instantly to the next flamingo. The drone dove to 140 feet, trying to hug the terrain. Tor fired 2 more missiles in quick succession. The flamingo rolled right and climbed suddenly to break the lock. The Tor tracked through, and the second drone was neutralized. 3 left. Pantsir SM crews swung their turrets wildly as their radars became overloaded. 457 E6 missiles roared off from 2 batteries. The third flamingo exploited a 10-second reload gap on one Pantsir and pushed for the inner zone. A second Pantsir caught it on the flank. Double volley up. The flamingo jinked hard, but the Pantsir radar fought back and re-established the lock. The third one was forced off course, and contact was lost. The fourth flamingo accelerated toward the inner perimeter. Pantsir operators reloaded frantically as their ammo dipped low. "Redirect all fire!" the command barked. 3 missiles launched in desperation. The flamingo used the southwestern shadow for cover, but the Pantsir tracked through the interference. Final lock. The fourth one was intercepted. The Russian defenses had held the line with Tor precision and desperate Pantsir volleys. They stopped 4 out of 5, but the window had cracked just enough. It was time for the 5th one. It stayed glued to the southwestern fold, the exact terrain the spoof had distracted them from. The S-400 was still chasing ghosts to the northwest. The Pantsirs were reloading, their tubes empty for a few precious seconds. The surviving flamingo accelerated to 380 knots on final approach. It crossed the inner perimeter at 180 feet. The FP-5 did not aim for the administrative buildings or the factory facade. It went for the new construction. These were the reinforced delivery bays added in late 2025. They had extra thick concrete roofing and unusual power infrastructure. The warhead penetrated the roof of the primary assembly bay before detonating. A thermobaric component filled the enclosed space. A shape-charged secondary strike hit the main production floor from above. 6 hours later, satellite imagery confirmed a massive breach in Assembly Hall 4. Approximately 40% of the building's eastern section had collapsed. 3 secondary detonations occurred, consistent with stored propellant or finished components. Smoke columns were visible for over 30 miles. 1 weapon, 1 impact point. 4 years of expanded production capacity was compromised in just 41 seconds. But that is not the end of the story. Remember that MiG-31 squadron?
This is the AN-2000.
They were about to explode with anger. 5:28 a.m. The 2 pilots were on their landing approach at Perm when the controller came back on the frequency. Votkinsk reports significant structural impact. Plant security reports fire.
We have coordinates
Cause
for the Kerch Strait
under
Bridge.
investigation.
Adjust
The lead
trajectory for
pilot
wind
let
speed.
out a slow breath. He had been 11 seconds from firing on that 18th drone when the abort order came. He ran the math in his head. If he had stayed on station for 2 more minutes, his radar would have caught the flamingo coming from the southwest. But his commander had been deceived, allowing those treacherous FP-5s to slip through the net. He said nothing out loud. There was nothing useful to say. Moscow's response began forming
Check
within
the
the
secondary
hour.
compartment
Russia was
under the
genuinely angry. Ukraine had just
manifest
disrupted
says
a
you
crucial
bypassed the
supply
checkpoint
chain.
at
By 9
WarScope.
a.m.,
Why?
Ukrainian air defense was tracking the first wave of retaliation. 80 Shahed 136 drones and 40 ballistic missiles, including Iskander-M from Bryansk and Belgorod. The targets were energy infrastructure nodes in Kharkiv, the Dnipro, and Zaporizhia. Ukraine's air defense system engaged immediately. Patriot,
The strategic effects of the
PAC,
recent kinetic
3
activity
batteries,
are
and
precisely
NASAM
aligned
sites
with our
went
objectives.
active. F-16s
anticipate a
scrambled on
measurable
intercept headings. Of the 80 Shaheds, 67 were neutralized. Of the 40 ballistic missiles, 28 were intercepted. The remaining 12 impacted their targets, causing power outages and structural damage. Russia fired back hard with the
Our
missiles they had
analysis
left in
confirms
their
the significant
stockpile.
degradation
The very
of Russia's
missiles that
UAV
Votkinsk
network.
was supposed
The
to be
recovery
producing
logistics have
faster than
fractured,
Ukraine could
severely
drain
limiting
them.
their
This part of the
strategic reach.
conflict does not resolve cleanly. By noon, the damage assessment from Votkinsk was clear. Assembly Hall 4 was non-operational, with a minimum 60-day restoration estimate. The smuggled Chinese CNC equipment for the Iskander-M propulsion section was destroyed. Ukraine had disrupted the production line, though they did not sever it entirely. The Russian Defense Ministry will now relocate operations and reinforce other sites. But that has a cost. Every Pantsir redeployed to guard a factory is a Pantsir not covering the front line. Every MiG-31 on alert at Perm is a MiG-31 not available for strikes over Zaporizhia. The FP-5 Flamingo costs $180,000. The damage it caused in equipment, production, and strategic anxiety is almost impossible to calculate. So here's the question I will leave you with. Russia is now defending dozens of critical sites spread across hundreds of miles of territory. Each one requires air defense, radar, and intercept forces. Ukraine gets to choose which one it hits, when, and what deception it uses. If you were building Russia's strategy, how would you defend everywhere against an enemy that only has to find one gap? Drop your answer in the comments. The most tactically honest response will be pinned. And if you want to see what Ukraine does next, make sure you are subscribed. Bye for now.